The Wars is a novel written by Timothy Finlay. This novel is a tragic story of the life of Robert Ross. Robert Ross has enlisted in the Canadian Army after the tragic death of his sister, Rowana. Robert was supposed to be looking after her, but instead he was in his bedroom. The novel highlights the difficult times throughout Robert's life that he has to face. He has to face the fact that he cannot kill because of his soft heart. He has to face the fact that he is a homosexual. He also has to face the fact that he gets raped, which is very difficult for him because those were his own soldiers. At the end, Robert is tragically killed. Robert is killed when he asks Captain Leather to release the horses that are in a barn, lest they be killed by the German shells. The request is denied, but Robert and Devlin set out to do so anyways. The captain shoots and kills Devlin but misses Robert, who, as the shelling continues, kills the captain. Robert flees knowing he will face court-martial for disobeying orders. The action circles back to prologue and he frees the horses. He becomes trapped in a barn with the horses when soldiers set it on fire. The horses are killed and Robert is badly burned. A nurse at the hospital to which Robert is sent offers from a method of euthanasia, but he refuses. He cannot be placed in prison because of his condition and is instead sent on a leave for a long-term treatment. Juliet stays with him until his death. As you can see, Robert's life was very tragic. I will be discussing the themes in this novel, as well as the literary theories and literary devices. I will also be relating this back to other course material. As the novel progressed, several innocent figures were killed in the war. This begins with Rowana's death, a tragic accident due to the fact that Robert was in his bedroom while he should have been taking care of her. It is visited again after Robert shoots the innocent horse aboard the ship. He has been forced to commit an act he hates. Finley also comments on the age of men on board going to war draws the attention to their boyish innocence. They are barely men at all. Robert isn't the only character whose innocence is lost. Julia is forced to grow up quickly after seeing Robert and Barbara having sex. This incident also evokes the theme of change that appears in the novel. Rodwell too loses his innocence and takes his life as a result. He is driven to suicide after watching his fellow soldiers kill a cat just to taunt him. The destruction of the natural world and animals is also an example of the destruction of innocence. The second theme in this novel is animals. Throughout the novel, it is clear that Robert has a connection to the natural world and animals, most notably horses. He shares this with her sister Rowana, Harris, and Rodwell. All these characters foster a deep respect and reverence for the natural world, and it's among animals that Robert feels the greatest peace and belonging. He runs with coyotes and horses almost as one of them. There is a freedom and authenticity in the natural world that Robert does not find in human society. The destruction of these animals is what ultimately pushes him to act out violently against human construct of war. Isolated from other human beings, Robert finds himself more at home with animals. They do not judge him, he feels no need to impress them or hide from them. He can simply be himself. When it comes to other human beings, Robert is deeply caring of others, but there is an otherness about him. Rodwell captures this in his sketch of Robert. He is both human and non-human at the same time. Next, I will be talking about the literary devices used in the novel. The first literary device I noticed was imagery. When Robert is forced to kill the horse on the ship that injured itself, Finley uses imagery when Robert imagines his sister's chair being tipped over. This brings great guilt to him, but also lets the audience visualize how he feels in that present moment. The second literary device used in the novel was persona. Throughout the novel, Robert's persona changes. At the beginning of the novel, Robert is a relatively shy and outspoken young man who cares deeply about the natural world. At the end of the novel, however, one can see that his persona has changed for the worse. He has another side to him that is cruel and violent. He still does care for the natural world, but he will do his best to protect it, which can release his other side, such as killing Captain Leather. The third literary device used in the novel was foreshadowing. Finley uses foreshadowing at the beginning and end of the novel when Juliet witnesses Robert's shooting and destroying the tree outside. It foreshadows his other side. Also, when Juliet witnesses Robert and Lady Barbara having intercourse, it is explained as looking as if they were hurting each other, which foreshadows for when he is molested in the cell by the other inmates. Now I will be talking about literary theories. The first one I will talk about is historical criticism. This investigates the social, cultural, and intellectual context that produced the work. It impacts and explains the meaning on original audience as opposed to today's work. So this work talks about World War One, which happens in the 1910s and the 1920s. It talks about the culture and the people at the time. It even shows about how society had a hard time accepting homosexuals in society. The second theory I would talk about is biographical criticism. This theory considers that literature is written by actual people. It's the understanding of the author's life that's helped comprehend the work. The author's experiences shape the creation of the work. I think the author's experiences really create the work because Timothy Findley has went through his fair share of tough times. Being a homosexual back in the 1960s and 70s was very tough for him. He has faced a lot of flashback and hate from the media and the society. These experiences really relate to Robert Ross's time and his tragic life, especially being homosexual and how hard it was for him to accept that Eugene Taffler was also homosexual. Lastly, I will be talking about gender criticism. This examines how sexual identity influences the creation and reception of literary works. This began with the feminist movement. Feminist critics see a world saturated with male produced assumptions. This is important because in the book, the whole war is dominated by men. Women would usually do work like nursing, taking care of the soldiers, etc. Men will be out there fighting and doing all the hard work, basically. It's tough to see that women weren't given larger roles even though they were capable of doing so. This really shows how gender biased the times were, but this book is based on World War One and the 1910s, which explains a lot about the reality of the time. We'll be relating this book to the short movie Men in Black by Colby Buzzle. Colby Buzzle's Men in Black talks about the hardships in the War of Iraq. This relates to the wars because the wars is based on World War One. Though both of these are wars, they are very different and have very different objectives. Both of them had a very different outcome for the protagonist. In the wars, the protagonist was tragically killed, but in Men in Black, Colby Buzzle was able to survive and tell his story. Both of them do a good job of highlighting the harsh realities of war. Though these may be different times, the results were the same. Innocent people were being brutally murdered for absolutely no reason. Colby Buzzle was fortunate enough to survive and tell us his story. Well, folks, this is the end. We have talked about literary theories, literary devices, themes, and we have also related this back to other media outlets. Overall, the wars has taught me a lot of life lessons and has taught me the hardships of being in war. It also gives me an appreciation to live in the society that I do in a war-free country. I would highly recommend this novel.